Well, welcome to 2021. Happy New Year, everybody. We hope that you're having a great start, that you've had a wonderful sort of kickoff into the year because we're already a couple of days in. And so I hope your first couple of days of 2021 have been pretty exciting. One of the things that I have loved to do when I've traveled internationally is to actually test people on their Bible knowledge. And if I was going to set a goal for 2021, one of those would be, especially with all the extra time that we've got, would be to actually get to know the Bible a little bit more. And so I love to do these Bible quizzes, like how many books in the New Testament, how many books in the Old Testament, how many apostles were there, all included. The whole process of Bible trivia has a bit of a fascination for me as well. And lots of people have been involved with Bible quizzing over the years. So I've got a bit of a Bible trivia and a Bible quiz question for you as we kick off into this new year. Maybe it'll be a little bit more of an incentive in terms of how well you're doing related to sort of how well do you know the Bible. So do you recognize any of these famous Old Testament characters? So I'm going to list them, and then I'm going to give you a couple of hints and see if you can figure out what it was that made them famous. So one of them was a fellow by the name of Shammua, not to be confused with Shamu the whale, Shaphat, Igal, Palti, Gadiel, Gadi, Amiel, Sether, Nabi, and Geuel. El in the endings of a lot of the Jewish terms refers to God. So it's some types of connection. So that was a list of some actually very famous Bible characters. And so what I'm wondering is, how many did you recognize? So let me give you a little bit of a backdrop. They were each tribal leaders, and they were entrusted with a great, great responsibility. They were actually spokespersons in the decision-making that shaped the destiny of the nation of Israel. These are just not no-names, though they seem like no-names because nobody knows their names, at least not with any kind of familiarity. And here might be why. Hopefully you figured out who somehow they might have been. They were the 10 of the original Dirty Dozen, as I call them, that went in to spy out the land of Canaan. There were the 10 of the 12, and so I've just listed them. And so ultimately, really, their names are forgotten. And maybe that's because they never went anywhere. And we don't remember these other key people by name, but they did shape the destiny of Israel, the decisions and the things they said. So what about the other two? We know the song, 12 men went to spy on Canaan, 10 were bad and 2 were good. So we know the names of the other two, Joshua and Caleb. They were tribal leaders. They were entrusted with a great responsibility. They were spokespersons in the decision-making that shaped the destiny of the nation of Israel. And they were 2 of the original Dirty Dozen that went in to spy out the land of Canaan. And ultimately, their names are remembered because they went somewhere. They did something. They actually and eventually will become the dominant force that God will use for his purposes. Eventually. They could have been used earlier, but as we'll see, there's some problems. So we're all going to be walking into 2021. It's going to be way different, I suspect, than 2020 and 2019. But we're all going to walk in it together. We're going to enter into it, and we actually have taken a few days already. But I wonder whether we're welcoming the adventure. What's our attitude towards 2021? Is it one of fear and apprehension, or do we have a sense of anticipation and welcoming what 2021 might be? Because one of the things that we do know is things are going to keep moving forward, one way or the other. And we have a chance to consider what we might do with all of that. So as I got thinking about 2021, I wanted us to do so by taking a look at those 12 guys and taking a look at what they learned and what they saw and how the response of those 12 men made a difference. So we have been using this theme, let's go for a walk. And we've been following the nation of Israel out of Egypt, down to the Red Sea, through the Red Sea. And now it's a number of months later when the nation of Israel is at the borders and God is getting ready to give them the opportunity to go in and see the land. And so in Numbers chapter 13 and Numbers chapter 14, if you want to spend some time and read in this next week with all of your extra time, to read through those verses. So I'm going to just grab some of them as we go through. Verse 1, it starts, "The Lord said to Moses, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders." And so that's what happens. So the Lord's commanded Moses, sent them out from the desert of Paran. All of them were leaders of the Israelites, and these are their names. And we've already given you their names. When Moses sent them to explore the land, here's their marching orders. He said, "Go up through the Negev and on into the hill country. See what the land is like, and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or are they fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it or not?" Because they're looking about taking over the land of which they know nothing about. They might have heard stories, but now they get a chance to see it for themselves. And so he has this sort of takeover plan. We need to know what we're getting into. "Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land." It was the season of the first ripe grapes. So they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rehob toward Lebau and Hamath. Basically, they're going to cover it east to west, north and south. They went up through the Negev, through the desert, and came to Hebron, where Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmi, the descendants of Anak, lived. Those three guys get listed by name. It's like, woo! These are the descendants of Anak, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Hebron had been built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. This is an old city. And when they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. That's a big cluster of grapes. And anytime that you see it depicted, it's a big cluster and the 2 boys are carrying it on this branch and it's bending down. It's huge, is what they're bringing back. And that's what they're needing to show. The place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut off there. And at the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. So let's take a little backdrop for a moment. 40 days. It's your dad that went off. It's your brother that went off. It's these young men, these older men that headed off entrusted with this great responsibility. And at the end of the first week, you haven't heard from them, or the second week, or the third week, or the fourth week. All that you know is they've gone in to spy out a land that no one knows anything about, and they're not back yet. And the anxiety and the wondering and the fear that creates, because we don't know if they're coming back. It's like dealing with somebody who's run away or has an illness and is admitted to the hospital, and you don't know what's going to happen. But after 40 days, and there's lots of significance around the 40 days, but we won't worry about that. But after the 40 days, they returned from their wandering, and they gave Moses this account. "We went into the land to which you sent us, and it flows with milk and honey." And that's sort of like the phrase that's come to mean it's got everything you might ever want. It's all there for us. It's all there for the taking. It's like it's ripe and ready. It's flowing everywhere, abundance and opportunity. And here is its fruit. And they lay it out before everybody, and they just sort of stand back and go, "Can I have some?" And so there they are, all wondering and marveling at all these provisions. But like in lots of things, there's always a but. And the but shows up from these guys. They're going, here's all the things that we're showing you, but in verse 28, but the people who live there, remember they were supposed to check out the people, few or many, what they were like. But the people who live there are powerful. And the cities, they're not weak. They are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. And Anak is the giants of the land. That's where Goliath, he's a descendant of Anak. And so you've got this realization that there's some big people there. And then they talk about the Amalekites live in the Negev, in the south, the Hittites, the Jebusites in around Jerusalem, and the Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea along the Jordan. And so 5 nations. So here's a quick summary on what they saw. They saw a land flowing with milk and honey. They saw fertile valleys, a high country, and a desert region. They saw figs and pomegranates. They saw vineyards of grapes of gigantic proportion. They saw large fortified cities. They saw 5 nations, which would suggest even then 5 language groups that were interspersed throughout that region. And they saw the giants. They saw the giants. So I got thinking about us. What do we see? What do we see ahead in 2021? What's shaping even your thinking about what 2021 might be? How optimistic are you? Or how pessimistic? Or are you more of a realist? What are you thinking? Are you anticipating the new year with a sense of incredible opportunity? Amazing things that we might be able to step into? Or are we somewhat like the butters? But it's great, but we're familiar with the phrase, he who hesitates is lost. It actually came from an English essayist and poet, Joseph Addison. And there's more to it with what he wrote. He who hesitates is lost. And I wondered whether after Caleb and Joshua were listening to the report, the but report, I wonder whether he's going, man, I got to step up and say something because it's not sounding good. And this phrase that Addison put together, he who hesitates is lost. Swift and resolute action leads to success. Self-doubt is a prelude to disaster. And so in verse 30, then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. I think he was getting nervous because he saw the great opportunity, and the naysayers and all the complainers and the grumblers, they've got this big voice out there. So in contrast to his, we can do it. We need to go in and we can do this. We have the butter group. Verse 31, but the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. You know, this past year I have heard so much negativity and so little positive. I hear so little positive in the news. Yeah, the number of recovered cases gets overshadowed by the number of losses. And not to minimize the grief that's wrapped in the loss. But that reporting is so minimalized, so to speak. And so many things about other things that are happening that have been transformational, the amazing things that people have done, the resilience, the resolve, even in the midst of these great difficulties. It is easy to spread bad reports. And that's what was going on here. And they said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of giant size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak came from the Nephilim. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. And that's a tragic description of a nation that has seen God do powerful things in their wanderings to this point. God has been their provider. God has been their deliverer. And now they seem to themselves to be like grasshoppers. And they say, and we looked the same to them. It reminded me of when I was a chaplain with the football teams. I felt like a little grasshopper among all these great men, huge men. And they weren't giants. They were just big boys. And that night, chapter 14, verses 1 and 2, that night all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt. If only we had died in the wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? That's a good question. Because he wasn't. He hadn't brought them there to die by the sword. He brought them there to enter into his blessings, into his promises. Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to each other, let's choose a leader and go back to Egypt. It's interesting when we face a new year. It's interesting when we face new opportunities. What's our response? Well, in verse 5, Moses and Aaron fell face down in front of the whole Israelite assembly gathered there. And Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. Sure, it's got some difficulties, big difficulties, huge difficulties, but it's exceedingly good. 2021 is exceedingly good as it's laid out before us. There are good things to anticipate. And this is why he says, if the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey. There it is again. And will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord. It's like a prayerful pleading. It's all laid out for us. Trust what God will do. And he continues, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. We will be the victors. When we think about our Christian hope, we are the victors, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of this coming year. Don't be afraid of all of these things. We have a source of life and hope. So here's some lessons to take into 2021. People can see the same thing and come to very different conclusions. And that's borne out over and over and over again. And every time there's an incident that needs to be reported on. Anytime there's some kind of diagnosis that needs to be made. Anytime that there's an opportunity that needs to be experienced or considered. We've got this sense that people can see the very same thing, a land flowing with milk and honey, but it's not for us. Oh, yes it is. And come to very different conclusions. That's the first one. The second one is the opposing voices often outweigh the supporters by 5-1. I was pretty sure that that's the math on the Dirty Dozen. 2 against 10, that's 5 against 1. Oftentimes in decision-making for leaders, for churches, there will be all kinds of opposition, far more opposition than you will likely find supporters. 5-1. It can be that bad. So here's something that I know when you're in that place. Majority vote doesn't make it right. It just makes it legal. So they had a vote, and the nation headed back, and God sent them out into the wilderness for 40 years, a year for every day that they had been in the land. And it's God's cleansing program as those people will die off, all those over 20 years of age, an entire generation in 40 years will be eliminated, and a new generation will be given the opportunity to consider if they would trust God or not. You see, it takes courage to stand for what is right. And we've got a great opportunity to stand for many issues in this coming year and stand for that which we believe to be right. But here's the issue. It can take a long time to be proven right. It can take a long time to be proven right. And so sometimes we need to allow decisions to be made and just let them work themselves out. My past experiences shape my faith decisions. I'd like to suggest that the reason Joshua and Caleb were able to believe that God could do miraculous things in battle is because they had already done battle on behalf of the nation of Israel. You remember when they were fighting and Aaron and Hur held up the arms of Moses so that when his arms were up, the battle would succeed, and Joshua would look up and go, yep, God's at work. I can see him, and now we're having victory. And so if we look to God, we can have victory. So they knew that they could trust God, even in the battles. A couple of things about opportunities in 2021. When opportunity comes knocking, a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. That was Winston Churchill. And he faced some great difficulties. And so where do you sit on that side? Are you somewhat more the pessimist or somewhat more the optimist? Because there's great opportunity in every difficulty, and for sure we've had a lot of those. I found this cute little letter, just a little note. Dear optimist, pessimist, and realist, while you were busy arguing about the glass of water, half full, half empty, I drank it. Sincerely, the opportunist. That just cracked me up. The opportunist. Oh, everybody's arguing about half full, half empty. Somebody just steps up and drinks it. Uses the opportunity. I found another interesting way to say this. Pride says it's impossible. I hadn't thought about this before, but pride says it's impossible because it needs to say it like that so it doesn't risk the shaming if it doesn't work out. Experience says it's risky. I know what this can be like. It's risky. Reason says it's pointless. Why would you even bother? Why would we even try to do that? It's pointless. There's no chance of success. But the heart often whispers, give it a try. Give it a try. When opportunity knocks, don't let fear hold you back. Open the door and embrace the opportunity that has come forth. And the doors are opening into this new year to new and exciting opportunities. And I choose to walk confidently through them. And that's your choice as well. Don't just dream of success. Create a plan and act upon it. And that's what we're going to do coming into 2021. We're already starting to plan for things with Canada Summer Jobs and what it might be like and what things can we do in the community. We don't want to just be sitting and waiting and watching for something to happen. We want to create some of those opportunities. That momentum creates the door upon which opportunity knocks. It's so much easier for us to plan and pray and purposefully consider our future than it is for just to sit back and go, well, whatever. Opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work. Thomas Edison. Mary was reading this book by Anne Voskamp. It's called Be the Gift, and it had this great phrasing in there. Before you blink and your one life's a tendril of smoke, a memory, a vapor, gone. Before you blink, it's gone. But know this, you are where you are for such a time as this. Not to make an impression, but to make a difference. We aren't here to one-up one another, but to help one another up. And it's our choice as we come into this year. It's our choice to believe we can do it. We, in submission to the Holy Spirit's leading, in response to his invitation, come possess the land. Come enter in for that I have prepared for you. My challenge for us is, will we be like Joshua and Caleb? Will we, in spite of many of the naysayers and the butters, are we going to believe that God is able to work through the COVID, through the isolation, through all of these things? Can God work today? As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It's your choice how you come into this year. Come with us with a sense of opportunity and see what God will do. Let's pray together. Father, move us to be a people of faith and courage, not a people of fear, but one who believe that you are able to work mighty and powerfully in this age and at this time. And we will give you all the glory for all that will be done in the mighty name of Jesus in this coming year. So, Lord, enlighten what's dark in us. Strengthen what's weak in us. Mend what's broken in us. Bind what's bruised in us. Heal what's sick in us. And lastly, revive whatever peace and love has died in me. Amen. In the words of Yoda, a happy new year. I hope you have. God bless you.